A cup of beer changed everything. Not a punch, not a weapon. A plastic cup of beer thrown from the stands, and 9 professional basketball players lost a combined 220 games because of it. Here is what the NBA never told you about the night everything collapsed. The 19th of November, 2004. Palace of Auburn Hills. Indiana Pacers versus Detroit Pistons. 45 seconds left. The Pacers winning by 15. The game was dead. Nobody needed to be on that court. And then Ben Wallace drove to the basket. Ron Artest fouled him hard, and Wallace shoved Artest directly in the face. Players moved in. Referees moved in. It looked like every other brawl that gets separated in 30 seconds and forgotten by morning. Then the cup hit. John Green, sitting in the front row, threw a full cup of beer that struck Ron Artest in the chest. Artest stood up from the scorer's table where he had been lying down already. A provocative choice looked directly into the stands and ran straight into the crowd. 9 minutes of chaos followed. Players fought fans. Fans attacked players. Stephen Jackson jumped into the stands after Artest. Jermaine O'Neal punched a fan who had run onto the court. Security was overwhelmed inside the first 60 seconds. The NBA had completely lost control of its own building. The images went everywhere, every network, every front page. And David Stern, the commissioner, understood immediately what this meant for a league that had spent 15 years rebuilding its image after the cocaine crisis of the 1980s. He needed someone to blame. He had 9 of them. Ron Artest received 73 games, the longest non-drug suspension in NBA history at that point. $5 million in lost salary, gone. Stephen Jackson received 30 games. Jermaine O'Neal got 25, later reduced to 15 on appeal. Anthony Johnson, David Harrison, and 4 Pistons players received suspensions ranging from 1 to 6 games. 9 players total, tens of millions of dollars in lost wages. The fan who threw the cup that started everything? John Green was banned from the Palace of Auburn Hills, not from every arena, one building. He was never criminally charged. The league never identified him publicly as the initiating cause. He settled a civil lawsuit filed by Artest and went home. But here's what nobody talks about when they tell this story. The Indiana Pacers in November 2004 were the best team in the Eastern Conference. They had the depth, the talent, and the competitive positioning to win a championship that season. Jermaine O'Neal was 26 years old, averaging 20 points and 10 rebounds per game, entering the peak years of his career. Stephen Jackson was 30 years old and playing the best basketball of his life. The window was open. The suspensions closed it permanently. The Pacers finished that season 20 games below their pace from the year before. They never recovered that roster. They never recovered that moment. An organization built over years of careful construction was dismantled in 48 hours by an institution protecting its own reputation. And the institution had a problem it refused to acknowledge. The security at the Palace of Auburn Hills on the 19th of November, 2004 was inadequate. The protocols for preventing fans from accessing the playing surface were inadequate. The systems for managing a crowd that had escalated beyond normal volatility were inadequate. The NBA created the conditions for what happened that night. The league's own arena, its own event, its own security infrastructure, all of it failed simultaneously. Not one suspension went to a league official. Not one accountability measure was directed at the organizations responsible for arena security. Not one public acknowledgement came from the commissioner's office that the environment created by inadequate preparation contributed to what occurred. Instead, Stern implemented a dress code the following season. Players would now be required to wear business casual attire when not in uniform, a direct response to the image of players in street clothes in the stands. The policy was presented as professionalism. Everyone understood what it was actually about. It was about making the players look less threatening. It was about managing the optics of who was responsible for November 19. Ron Artest went on. His talent was too exceptional to be permanently derailed. He won a championship with the Los Angeles Lakers in 2010, embraced his mental health journey publicly, and changed his name to Meta World Peace, then to Meta Sandiford Artest, in ways that reflected a genuine personal evolution most people never credit him for. He has said in interviews that running into the stands was wrong. He has also said that being hit with a cup while lying down, while people yelled directly at his face, produced a reaction that no amount of professional training had prepared him for. Stephen Jackson has never fully accepted the framing of that night. He believes he protected his teammate. He believes that what he did in the stands was a response to a situation the league created and then punished him for surviving. He has said this publicly, repeatedly, without apology, for 20 years. Jermaine O'Neal punched a fan who was on the court, not in the stands, on the court, the playing surface. The man had physically crossed every barrier between spectator and player and entered the game space. O'Neal's response to that incursion cost him 25 games and permanently altered the trajectory of a career that should have included a championship window he never got back. The fan was not charged. O'Neal paid 15 games of salary. 2 decades later, the Malice at the Palace gets shown in documentaries, discussed in podcasts, replayed in highlight reels. It is presented as basketball's darkest moment, as proof of what happens when players lose control. The framing is always about the players. It is never about the cup. It is never about John Green. It is never about a security apparatus that failed so completely that fans and players were occupying the same space, throwing punches at each other for 9 minutes while cameras broadcast it nationally. It is never about an institution that handed 9 players the bill for its own failure and called it justice. The NBA implemented better security protocols after that night. Every arena in the league upgraded its procedures. Barriers were reinforced. Response teams were expanded. The infrastructure that should have existed on the 19th of November 2004 was built in the months that followed, built because what happened that night proved it was necessary. The players who were suspended did not receive acknowledgement that the environment they were placed in had failed them. They received their suspension notices and their public condemnation and the narrative that made them the cautionary tale. Ron Artest was wrong to run into the stands. That much is not in dispute. But wrong decisions made by human beings in volatile environments are shaped by those environments. The environment on November 19 was created and managed by the NBA. The volatility was allowed to build beyond the point of control by systems the NBA was responsible for maintaining. 9 players lost games, money, and in several cases, the trajectory of what their careers should have been. John Green, who threw the cup that triggered it all, lost his spot in one building. The night the NBA lost control cost 9 men everything. The cover-up was in calling it justice.